Hello and welcome to Contramundum. I'm Andrew Isker, and joining me is recently released CJ Engel from Jury Duty. How are you, CJ? Are you still trusting the plan?
I am a plan truster. The judge, I basically slipped him a 20 and it said contramundumpodcast.com on it. And he lowered his glasses and he's like, "You're free to go."
You may go. Yeah.
So yes, the Patriots are in control in California.
In control. Little known fact. They're in control there. People don't know that. So yes, here we are. Donald Trump convicted yesterday evening of 34 counts of no one really knows what. What was the charge?
Did you read the charges? It was sent an invoice for legal services was one of them. He signed off on an invoice.
Yeah.
It's and they're all felonies. Right?
Yeah, he didn't label it money to keep some insane woman accusing you of improprieties quiet, right?
Which is not illegal.
Yeah, totally legal to make people sign sign an NDA.
And the issue was that it was the reason why all of these misdemeanors, which are not even misdemeanors. I mean, it's I don't know. It's not even like a traffic violation. It's less than that. But they were turned into felonies because he allegedly was using them for campaign, trying to undermine campaign finance laws, which he's not been convicted of, right? And it's the whole thing. Obviously, I mean, it's a political persecution, and if you won't admit that, you're obviously a regime crank. That's all you are.
Yeah, a toady.
So these people are not serious. But I think that this is actually, it's not just good for Trump. It's good for Christian nationalism. It's good for the right wing. It's good for everything that we've been claiming about the managerial state is true. We've been completely vindicated.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, just looking at this, right? I mean, just the absurdity of it all, right? Just the absurdity that, right? They're charging him for campaign finance violations when he used his own personal money to settle this.
Yeah.
And think about if he had done the other, right? If he had used campaign money to pay this woman to go away, right? Yeah. He'd be charged with felonies over that, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so there's no winning with it. No matter what he does, they're going to be charged with it. And so this is right. This is it here, from Truddle. I love how the Constitution dead discourse could not have been timed any better. What was your favorite "the Constitution's still alive, guys" moment? Because that has passed.
Well, I mean, Owen's little lecture. I mean, he's always the best scold on this, boomer scold. Because he's he has no idea what's going on. Yeah. He's incredibly dumb about things. And I don't say that about all of the people I disagree with, but he's legitimately he has no idea what's happening. Yeah. He's never read a political theory book in his life except for some fifth grade.
Maybe he's read some Bill O'Reilly books or Mark Levin.
There's no way he even knows that. There's no way he's read a Bill O'Reilly book.
Yeah, it's too.
So, should we add Kryptos?
Yes. Hello, Kryptos. Welcome. Special guest Kryptos joining us for this emergency podcast. How are you?
I'm excellent. Yourself?
Oh, well, we could be doing better down here in America, but but we're doing okay. We will win. We are going to win.
We've already won.
Yeah, I think so. What do you think, Kryptos, just about the long-term prospects, what this means? Obviously Trump, the story is that he raised $35 million overnight from small donors, not from big millionaires or anything like that, but from regular. I had breakfast with some guys from my church this morning. The first thing they did last night was donate $100 to the campaign.
Wow!
And so they're all wearing their Never Surrender shirts at breakfast this morning. So everybody knew where they stood.
Speaking of shirts, Andrew, we haven't commented on your setup over there.
Oh yeah, in the chat.
I was just about to ask why you're wearing a flak jacket in the.
I'm ready. I'm ready. It's because it's an emergency podcast. It's wartime. Let's go.
It's wartime.
Let's go. But
it is a delight to be on with you guys. I think this is my first time on here, so it's a pleasure to. It really remains open to be seen what is going to happen in the future. A lot of it depends, and some of it too is we're faced with these questions now of whether, active revolt bubbles up from below or whether it's dictated from on high. Will there be people in the elite classes who will, gather to his defense and do something meaningful? This is in many ways a real first that somebody has been prosecuted largely for political reasons. I mean, that's part of what happens when you're in office. Part of being in office often means that you do things that are technically illegal. It's just there. I doubt that there is a president in the history of the presidency for whom you couldn't find something that you could charge them on. And it's been long one of those unwritten conventions that you don't prosecute people politically. And even, you think back to Trump with the lock her up, that, the rumors came out of the White House. I remember that after he was inaugurated, that people talked Trump off the ledge and said, listen, it was great for the campaign, but in practice, we just don't do this sort of thing in America. We don't prosecute people for their political opinions. And now it's been done. And so, you could find something, and I'm sure he's technically guilty of whatever they charged him of, but everybody knew that the conclusion, the outcome was a foregone conclusion, that this was only going to end with him being guilty. And I think that's why, in some sense, it's almost kind of a non-event news-wise. But it really remains to be seen, the negative effects that this has on the legitimacy of the state. Because I really think that this is a mistake, because they've made him into a martyr, and now to be honest with you, I think this was a dumb thing that somebody did, and the fact that they let somebody do this says that the regime is starting to lose control of its own narrative, because this was just not smart. Because now you're juicing his supporters to want to elect him more than ever.
That's right.
We got BC in here. I'm like 90% sure I know who you are, but do you want to announce yourself, or do you want to just stay
Yes.
BC?
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear us?
I can hear y'all really well. Really well. I've gone by many names on Twitter and other places, but you can use my name, Ben Castle.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, good. All right.
What do you think, Ben? What do
I think? What do I think about the Trump verdict? Is that what we're talking about?
It is. Yeah.
The topic of the day.
Well, I like what I think CJ said on Twitter a little while back yesterday. The Constitution is going to be so ticked when it hears about this.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, one of the things in the chat here, I want to, we have a lot of people chatting in the chat, but right here, this one I want to get to. I think this is worth discussing. Good fodder. No offense, but why are people putting their hope in Trump? This is from 80s nostalgia guy. What did he do in his first term to warrant such loyalty?
We've talked about this a lot, but
we have, but it's worth bearing right now. I mean, in the context of this discussion.
So the entire purpose of what we do is to delegitimize one of the most totalitarian and wicked regimes in world history, and particularly it's because we are the oppressed in this situation. We are the ones that are experiencing the brunt of this regime's ire. And so it's not about Trump. It's about delegitimizing the regime. And Trump is a proxy of all of our discontents. He's a proxy of all of our impulse that the regime hates us. He's a proxy of we do not care for their narratives. We do not care for the path they're taking us down. And Trump is someone that they are frustrated by because he's not on board with things. And so therefore, he's basically just an avatar for everything that we want to see done to the regime and its narratives and its legitimacy.
This was something that I did a long Twitter thread on a while back, in that, how effective or ineffective Trump is doesn't really matter at this point anymore. He's as CJ said, he's a condensed symbol for people's outrage at the system. It's more the fact of Trump than any policy he has, any effectiveness he has. The fact that he annoys them is enough, and that he represents somebody who is even making a modicum of an attempt to listen to the people.
Yeah, I think there's that. Like you said, cryptos, but and also the fact that it's not about the man himself, right? Because the question is, right, what has he done that brings about such loyalty? He hasn't really done anything, and I mean we can get into like why didn't he do anything? Like one of the replies is like Trump had the opportunity to declassify the JFK documents, but chose to keep them sealed. But even just like think about that comment for 1 second, right? If the JFK documents are what people think they are, that the deep state, the Central Intelligence Agency, whatever, killed the president of the United States, right? Why wouldn't a president unseal documents like that? If it's proof that they could kill the president of the United States, why would you be hesitant to do that, right? I mean, obviously there's reasons why, or why. I mean, even going back to like the primary season and some of the like the DeSantis people, like why didn't he prosecute? Why did he keep Fauci employed? Why didn't he prosecute him? Why did he do all of these things? Well, he can't, right? He can't. Like if he lops off the head of that Hydra, look what he got impeached over, right? He got impeached over digging into Joe Biden's malfeasance in Ukraine. Right, he got impeached over looking into what Joe Biden did. Right, he got impeached basically because he kind of sort of did some of the things to uncover what Joe Biden did outright and bragged about doing. Right, and so and that's like the like a tangential thing they maybe could have stuck on him. Right, if he actually took the knife to the administrative state and started lopping these people off. Right, he's done. Like the Joint Chiefs told him, they sent him a memo that said, if you use the military to put down the Floyd riots, we will remove you from office. Right, that tells you how much power the guy actually has. So I think anybody who, I mean, if you're like the true blue MAGA believers, like, oh, he's the guy, like the lion is restored, trust the plan, he's gonna save us. Right, I mean, all of that stuff is silly, of course. But that's not ultimately what I care about. I care about them doing, like, the fact that they're doing these things to him right now for the whole world to see was what matters.
Yes,
right?
That's
more
exactly
than anything else.
Right?
That's what matters.
It's not about Trump as the actual agent of this stuff. It's about pulling the mask off the regime, exposing it of all of its lies, all the myths that constitute it. I mean, the post-war consensus is dead. Francis Fukuyama is over. Their entire world has just died. I mean,
rest in peace, Francis Fukuyama.
We've been talking about this for 30, 40 years, people in our camp. But now it's all come to fruition, and anyone who doesn't admit it now is actually never going to admit it. I mean, this is it. This is the moment.
Yeah, that and I think you're right, CJ. Like anybody who can't see this, like as you mentioned maybe before we went on air, like all of the big Eva people like Russell Moore, David, I mean those people, but even the people, further down the food chain from them who are like, well, the jury made their decision and we still have the Constitution. We got to respect the rule of law. Like these people are your enemies, right? That's what you need to understand, right? Anybody saying that kind of stuff, they're not just like wrong. They're not just, mistaken. They're enemies because what they've done to Trump, they would do to you, right? Every single one of you, right? He's got billions of dollars to defend himself and all. I don't, you don't, none of us do, right? If they brought the hammer down, because look what they did. Look what it's over. It's over misclassifying a payment in a bookkeeping ledger, right? That's what they're putting him in prison over. Like, and they're gonna put him in prison. Anybody who says like, oh, when he gets his sentencing, they're gonna just give him a fine or something, like is nuts, right? They're gonna put him in prison over this, over nothing, over absolutely nothing. And if they do it to him, they will do it to you too.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Do you think that I think that they're gonna put him in prison. I also think he's going to lose on appeal. I mean, we've all seen who's going to be,
that was fake. That wasn't that's not the one that's going to. No, it's not. It's not. No. Sorry. So he maybe has a chance.
Well, okay. So let's say he gets. I mean, so either way,
it's still in New York. It's still in New York City. So
yeah, but this can go up to SCOTUS, right?
Yeah. And honestly, they probably should just. What is it, like writ of certiorari? I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know these things, very well, but you can appeal right to the Supreme Court. They almost never take it, but in this case they might.
because they pissed off Alito.
Yeah, it's like the flag. You can't have that flag, man. You can't appeal to heaven. What? No. So I don't know. Maybe
I don't think it'll. I don't think he'll be in prison during the election because of that. What do you think? You think he'll get elected from prison?
I mean, I'm always looking for like the most entertaining storyline.
I know. We're trying to predict.
I want him to take the oath of office in the prison, like John Roberts is going to go down to the prison cell to administer the oath of office.
I do too.
In jail.
I do too.
I want that.
Take your vest off for a second. And what's your prediction here?
I want the Michael Bay. I want the Michael Bay movie.
That's right.
This is the perfect setup for a Michael Bay movie.
Yes. Yes.
In some ways, I think what they want to do is to make this the issue for the campaign, right? So, we're just how far away are we from the beginning of primary season? Have they even been having any primary votes yet?
Oh, you mean like the early voting?
Yeah. Like when do the primaries kick off?
Well, the primaries are done. I mean, you mean the conventions? The conventions are in midsummer. So his sentencing is like 4 days before the Republican National Convention, and which is interesting timing. And then
that's intentional, by the way.
Oh yeah, absolutely it is. And they're I mean, if he goes to prison, he will be in prison during from August, September, October. The early voting begins in most states in a month before the election, and so really you would have him in prison for like 8 or 10 weeks before people actually start voting. And I mean, you kind of had to they telegraphed what was going to happen when the Secret Service went into the jail and discussed like what it's going to look like to have the Secret Service in there with him, because he still has to have Secret Service protection. So
that could be interesting, like the Secret Service in prison, like exercise yard fights in the prison.
No, that would be interesting, but this is what I think will happen. Trump, I know we're being a little silly here, but Trump goes to prison and he ends up winning over the entire population with his charisma, and he rules like a gangland, Don from prison.
Him pictured there smoking his cigarettes that get smuggled in for him every day.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, but more seriously, I think I think he will go to prison. Maybe he's able to get out on appeal. I think a lot of these things will probably be expedited, just because he this is a genuine constitutional question, right? And so I think the odds are that maybe he spends some time behind bars, but not he won't be there forever. He'll still be able to campaign. But
I mean, even on the campaign, he should probably start wearing a prison jumpsuit. It's at a certain point in time, you've just got to max this thing and just lean into it, because it really does expose how delegitimized the system has become. The thing, probably the most laughable thing is not the Democrats in conjunction with the regime orchestrating this. It is those who are supposedly on the Republican side jumping into, we have to trust the system stuff, the formalism. That is probably your most egregious, and that's like as you're saying, Andrew, that's probably your most revealing thing, is just really how much of the Republican establishment wants this to happen. And I think that you're seeing a kind of unmasking of the whole system that began when Trump got elected, and the whole deep state stuff. I mean, we talk about it and use the term the deep state, but really that was just the true power in the nation exposing itself and coming to the fore, and they continue to do so only because the old mechanisms don't work with Trump. Like, they can't sideline him any other way than to unmask how power really works.
Yeah. The facade of a constitutional republic and things being normal and having these checks and balances and the Schoolhouse Rock version of everything, which never really was true, right? Everybody who knew that wasn't really real, but they had to tear down the facade to be able to do these kinds of things, which goes back to why Trump is so important, because he reveals how power actually works in America. Right. That's the importance of Trump. That's why the loyalty to Trump actually exists.
And the Republicans work with like the brochures that are handed out on day one and what they learned in Sunday school or Schoolhouse Rock about how the country runs. And that's really about the extent of it. Is they have the Sunday school version of American polity, and they continue to maintain that, because I think the problem is that if they came to the realization of the truth of things, the cognitive dissonance, I don't know if they can really operate in the world as it is. They're just not capable of doing so, and that's the real problem.
Yeah. I want to get to this question here from Fear of the Lord. Do you think the Dems are trying to provoke people into January 6th type things so they can crack down? I'll go with you guys answer that before I do. I think that's always there, right? They always want to provoke that, but I don't know if that's necessarily the first priority.
But if it happens, it'll be a bonus.
Yeah, absolutely.
They'll work with it.
I think that's a significant part of what they're doing too. I don't think they actually believe they can keep him in prison. I don't think they do. So I think what they want to do is they want to do the same thing as that happened on the 6th, is to just have this very trumped up, fueled situation with photo ops and everything else that they did on the ground there. And they want to create a certain narrative. And that's exactly what they want.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think, I think actually like the fact that Trump is still alive has prevented a lot of people who have nothing to lose doing crazy stuff, right? Because he's a pressure release valve for it. And so we could be thankful that they haven't, killed him or done anything like that. Because right, I think people, there's a lot of crazy people out there. And it isn't just the people that they, conjure up in militias and things like that. I mean, there are a lot of people angry, and things are a lot worse than they were even 4 years ago when they were doing all of that stuff, where people are losing their livelihoods. They're losing their whole nest eggs. Like they're going broke because of what they've done to the country. And so people can snap, right? That's a very real thing. And in one hand, like they want that, right? Because if somebody snaps and does something crazy, then they can just crack down on everybody. Right. So that's part of it for sure.
The challenge, though, Andrew, is that because of the nature of the administrative system, it's not like you have a king or a governor, where you can storm the governor's palace or whatever, and then just hang the object of our derision out on the, out of the upper, the parade window or whatever, where they do their hand waving, that you can hang him off the edge of that and make a symbol of revolt. Because the administrative state is just so omnipresent. I mean, and when you look at it in the way that I have often done through technique, I mean, you find the administrative state in business and NGOs, it's in think tanks, So what do you start doing? Like I keep getting haunted more and more with that image of Tim McVeigh and the Oklahoma bombing, right? Because I mean, when you begin to realize that the teachers in your local public school are no longer heroes and friends, that they're working for the enemy. If you have a state-run hospital, the doctors and nurses in your state-run hospital are part of the enemy. And even places where
just look at how to not to interrupt you, but like just look at how I mean people post, like physicians that are good people post what Blue Cross Blue Shield would give them, saying we'll give you like a $10,000 bonus or $20,000 bonus for every, for however many people that you get signed up to take the medical experiment. Right. And they're making millions of dollars getting their, like that's the enemy. Right? Then they comply with all of the restrictions, or you can't go visit your dad in the hospital because of the restrictions. Right? All of like that. That's the enemy. You're right.
Yeah, and so you're angry and you want to vent, but the problem is that who do you vent against? And this is really the thing. This is what January 6th exposed as well too. So you go and you take an impromptu tourist visit to the state or to the House buildings, and you come in and snap a few pictures on the floor of the Senate, and maybe you crossed a couple of ropes that you probably shouldn't have crossed, and the guards are chasing you out. But
20 years,
I mean,
sorry.
Yeah. But so beyond a couple of these like tourist events that have, what do you do? Who do you attack? And this is really the challenge that we face, is that, okay, you don't trust the system anymore. You know that whatever's going to happen, they're going to rig the elections. Who do you then direct your anger to? And it's a volatile situation, but this is really crazy. So in some sense, you're almost waiting for some event to happen that can then become the focus of people's anger, if it ever materializes. Or, and that's maybe the other thing, is that there's enough anger out there that the right demagogue, and this is something that Trump has not really done well, is he hasn't forged this anger into, because I think it could be a much more potent force than what it is. And he has not really gone to the lengths that he could go to fashion it into something sort of, like a hot, righteous, burning rage that, well, the problem is once you let these kind of fires go, they can get out of hand very quickly.
It's hard to control. Yeah,
that's right.
I want to go back up and talk about this for a minute, because Andrew, I may disagree with you on this, but I actually think that underlying it all is a very real possibility that it's all Hunger Games type stuff. I mean, I know that's more of a me thing.
Or just letting people go on each other kind of thing, CJ?
No, that Trump's basically been primed for the theater of it all, and he's not actually a rogue actor. He's either being played or he's part of the game. I think he's being played part of the game. I think that he's actually the type of personality that could fall into this role. And I think that all of this, because like, if you look at the, what's that like that girl reporter, she's done the stuff on like, the Dark Winter. She writes from like, Argentina or some Latin American country.
It'll come to you as soon as you go out there.
Like Whitney or Whitley. It's something like that. But she's basically been digging into like the Department of Justice and basically just the deep state, in the way that it's basically transformed administratively the anti-terrorism instincts, the anti-terrorism initiatives of the Bush administration. They've been transforming that and restructuring things and setting precedent to go after good MAGA types, heritage American types. And this whole thing is just part of that overall trajectory. I actually do put a lot of legitimacy into that. So sometimes it's fun to play the game online. I do, but I just want to really emphasize your fealty belongs to God and family. This country cannot be saved with by arming yourself and going and attacking that's exactly what they want. Don't be provoked into anything at all, because I think that they have the infrastructure ready to handle that.
Yeah, I agree.
Here's somebody in the comments said Whitney Webb.
Yeah.
There we go.
Whitney Webb. That's
Eric Muma there. Whitney Webb. That's the one.
Yeah.
No, so I and that's kind of, I mean, she's published on Lou Rockwell and Libertarian sites. So there's still a part of me though that that finds legitimacy in that type of analysis. I do think, I mean, and that's one of those debates, like, is the administrative state, is the deep state smart enough to coordinate these things? And I think there are aspects of it that, yes, they can do. They can't perfectly, string everything together like we're puppets, but they can definitely anticipate 10-year trends and react accordingly.
Yeah, and they can also
go ahead, Ben.
Go ahead, I was going to say, with the administrative state, I think back to 9/11. I think a lot of us, that was the first sort of red. It it wasn't a full capsule. Maybe it was a tablet, the red tablet that we took. But you start having discussions about that, and people are saying, well, the government, how many people would have to be in on the scam to pull that off?
Mm-hmm.
But if you have siloed operations, need to know basis, you can pull off a lot of things.
Yeah.
Where the administrative cogs in the machine are just doing what they're told. They're not thinking beyond their little action. So I think it very well could be the administrative state orchestrates the whole thing, but there's like 5 evil guys in a tunnel somewhere who have the roadmap. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I probably plot out on this spectrum somewhere in the middle, where obviously I think we can all agree that the administrative state, right, the managerial regime, they do evil stuff. They have a lot of power. They have a lot of ability to coordinate things. I mean, just look at 2020, for example. You don't even have to go any further back than that. But at the same time, they're really stupid people. Most of them. I mean, even the ones that we think are these evil geniuses, right? They're actually pretty stupid people, and they have a lot of power. They have a lot of ability to coordinate. I mean, just look at right now the things coming out on like FOIA documents and but with like the Wuhan lab and Dr. Fauci and things like that. Like they like it's all out in the open that they're doing these things, and some of it is they think that they can never get caught and nothing's ever going to happen to them. Like you see that they even talk about that. Oh, if Rand Paul could maybe harm us a little bit, but they don't seem too overly worried about it, right? Because they know that the regime is going to protect them at the end of the day. And so I think looking at it along those lines, like they do that stuff, obviously, but the idea that they could seed this presidential candidate to be this release valve and he's going to be part of it, and that they can make it all be entirely theater. I don't think they're capable of doing things like that, much less I don't think they fully comprehend the people, like the American people that he is going to resonate with, and the amount of anger and just genuine hatred that the American people have for them that's reciprocated, right? I don't think they fully comprehend those things to be able to manipulate it, right? And so I think they fight this like rearguard action against him, and I think to CJ's point, right, he's not like consciously thinking like I'm the guy that's going to solve all of these problems and I am going to lead America and defeat the managerial regime. Like I don't think he even thought of it in those terms until maybe after he was in office. Did he really?
He was not ready at all.
The depth of what these things are.
I think
everyone was pretty naive.
I don't think he's ready still. Like he's still talking friendly about Nikki Haley and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and I think to CJ's point, I tend to agree that this is one thing that has struck me, and it just never really clicked until CJ was, is he controlled opposition? Is that Trump has been remarkably contained and subdued. Like the campaigns, even though there's events and people are going, it's almost like they're doing their greatest hits again. Like that they're not. There isn't a kind of intensity of like a Boris Yeltsin climbing on top of a tank. You don't see that kind of level of intensity there, and we have to understand that the administrative state is not a single entity. Like it's a network and a nexus of nodes of power, and so it's governed by multiple layers of policy, multiple layers of decision making, and so you can even have arms within the system working at cross purposes to each other. You can issue a declaration, and it may or may not turn out the way you want by the time the policy gets enacted. It might turn out exactly the way you want. So it's very hard then to put your finger on where is this coming from? Where is this coming from? And a lot of times what you're seeing playing out in the political class, the people who are actually running for office, is they're basically the front men for a lot of these various different factions that are operating behind the scenes within the administrative state complex between, the think tanks, the administration, the lobbying group, and within this whole nexus of the expert class that runs this web of administration. They represent the different facts, because these guys aren't producing their own policy papers. They're relying on people to produce them for them. And so you see it filter up to the politicians. Trump seems remarkably contained, and the whole thing just seems to be geared towards more of the same. And everybody kind of knows that the election is going to be rigged. Trump's never going to actually get into office.
We can't say that. We got to say fortified. We got to say fortified cryptos.
Fortified. That's right. I don't want to get you banned on. Sorry about that. Yeah. It's going to be property fortified. So if the FBI is listening, the algorithms are listening. We didn't say that.
Yeah. That thing is rigged. They're just fortified, right?
They're just fortified. Yeah, no, but they're doing what they need to do to preserve democracy and the democratic system the way it is, and we get that and we understand that.
Just like Ukraine,
hard they work for it.
Just like Ukraine,
like Ukraine.
But
I think that. Go ahead, CJ.
No, it just like Iraq. We're basically receiving what they've already been practicing for decades. It's just now domestic.
Yeah, at least in Iraq, they made everybody like dip their finger in the indelible ink. Here we don't get such things here in America.
I think about going back a little bit to the cognitive dissonance that Kryptos was bringing up. I think about Rome as a 21st century American man often does, and
every day,
man. But you think about the position that the quote unquote Constitution holds in the psyche of a lot of Americans. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the Roman legions in Britannia. Mm-hmm. For a long time, they could just hide behind the reality of the legions that are there. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, the legions have to pull back because Rome is corrupt and they're losing money. And then the Britons, for the most part, are left defenseless and they don't really know what to do. I think there's a lot of that going on with the clinging to the constitutional order. It functions that way in a lot of people's minds. It's very scary to think about Britannia without the legions.
Yeah. That's exactly right. I think, Forms Respecter has a good comment here that we'll put on audio. That he says they have the power to capitalize on any situation, so they always come out on top. So it seems like everything is part of a plan. I think that's 100% right. That whatever ends up happening, they end up capitalizing on it. They don't let a crisis go to waste. And so it always seems, and so like if you're really schizo, right, it seems like, every single thing is planned out. They're omnipotent. They can do anything and everything. When they're reacting to things just like we are. They just have the ability through these means that we talk about, right? All of these little siloed departments that they have all their jobs, but in the back of everybody's heads is, we are defending democracy. We are defending, which is just code for the post-war regime. Right, we're defending that. We're upholding all these things, and so they're going to do their jobs to uphold it. That's why they'll push everything they did during 2020. So that's so much of what this is, right? If you understand things, yes, they do have the National Security Administration, but even there, like they don't have omnipotent power. I think that's the thing that we constantly. Right, if you've taken red pills on many things, right, it's easy to take the whole bottle and think that they have unlimited omnipotent power. They can do anything and everything. They can do a lot of things, but they're not omnipotent. They're not, and actually they're far less competent than they were 20 years ago. Right, so I think someone in the chat at one point here said, right, if Trump had happened in the 1990s, they just would have procedurally blocked him in every single way and just waited him out. Right. And the fact that they couldn't do that for whatever reason shows just how weak they are compared to 30 or 40 years ago. I think that's what it reveals as well, is that the system itself is breaking down in ways. Like they have all this power, but they don't have guys like Robert McNamara to run it anymore. Right. Instead, you got guys like Anthony Blinken. Right. That's what's going on. Hopefully, maybe I'm nuts. Maybe I'm the schizo. But
no, I don't think so. I think, and this leads my mind to something CJ's mentioned, and I think all of us are sympathetic to. This is why local, independent, masculine action is so important. Not because something you do at the local county office is going to topple the regime, but it's going to train us and our communities in exercising this virtue that is so necessary once the thing comes crashing down, because I don't think it can go forever.
Yeah.
You know, I think about the myth or the reality, whatever you want to say, of King Arthur.
Totally
you had
real.
a Briton, totally real, fantastic. You had a real Briton who was there in Rome, who was there in Britannia, but he was a man of action, and he was able to preserve something of his people and his culture after the legions left.
Yeah.
So that's why the local masculine exertion of our will and action is so important today. Yeah. Not because of what it can accomplish, but because of how it trains us to be men in this day.
Yeah,
well,
no, I
ahead,
completely agree with that. I mean, obviously I wrote that really long essay about, basically centered around local action, but the fact of the matter is none of us who are frustrated and want to know what in the world we should do right now, none of us are going to change things at the federal level. This is purely, this can only be taken care of at the elite level. Like if Eric Prince or Donald or Tucker Carlson, if people like that, of that stature want to get involved, that's on them. I love the drama of it all, but none of us are going to be able to have any effect. And so therefore we have to expend our bandwidth by protecting ourselves from the phenomenon of a falling empire. That's what we have. That's where we can expend our resources. Yeah.
Yeah. There's some good points in the chat here. I want to get to, and to piggyback on your point there, CJ and Ben, Max has a good point. He says he has to disagree because they've outsourced all of their competency to private companies like Apple, Palantir, Google, things like that. But that's a great point. You're right. But even there, those corporations are much weaker than they were 20 years ago. Like the competency crisis is real, and they can outsource it. But at the end of the day, right, you have all of these tools, but you don't have the people that are capable of wielding them well, right, to uphold things. Right. A lot of this is you have this regime that has become weaker and weaker. And one of the things I want to point out, and why what Ben is saying and CJ is saying is so important, is that like I talk about this a lot, but the entire foreign policy and monetary policy are intricately intertwined, right? You can't, where one begins, the other stops. You can't really figure out. And like the whole, that's ultimately what the whole Russia and Ukraine thing is about, right? The NATO, the United States exercising its power, trying to bring the Russians under their thumb. But you have countries moving away from the dollar. You have Russia being kicked off of the dollar, which I actually think is the reason why we're feeling the inflation we are, is because less and less of our inflation is being exported, right? We printed trillions of dollars in the early 2000s, in the 2010s. And we hardly felt that at all. Inflation was still around, 2, maybe 3% at its worst. And now it's not. Like, and why is that? Right? Why is that? It's not just because they printed money. Oh, it looks like Benny had to bounce. But because, right, the ability for the money machine to be able to force other countries to soak up our inflation, that's not as powerful as it once was. And so that trajectory is going to continue to be followed, right? We're going to face a lot more harder economic consequences in America over the next 10, 20, 30 years. And so to be able to have resiliency locally, Ben's back, to be able to have the resiliency locally, to be able to have local economies and local communities that are strong and support themselves is what is going to sustain what we call America today. It's not going to be it's not going to be our reverence for the Constitution that holds everything up. It's going to be what we build and create and what we do for ourselves, right? And so if an elite figure decides to pick up the crown in the gutter, great. We're not going to be able to will that to happen. Yeah. None of us are. But what we can do is there are important things we can do.
The part of the problem, I think, and this is like it's a dual maybe three sort of nested problems. One on the right, because we have this thing of better ideas will win the day. And this goes back to kind of the Buckley thing, right? The better ideas will win the day.
The marketplace of ideas.
But so we assume that thinking and writing is the same thing as doing, right? So that's kind of like two problems together. And then the third is that we're constantly looking for a savior figure, a Trump, the next guy is going to be the one that's going to right the ship. And when you look to the other side, to the left, what Biden has shown you is that it doesn't matter who's in charge. Yeah. And that's if people really need to understand that the president doesn't matter. Yeah. Right. So and really your elected officials don't matter because they don't run anything. They are the front man for the system. When you go back to, and I forget who, because I listen to a lot of stuff, but so I'm saying that what Gramsci's primary plan in the sort of the long march through the institutions was not actually to do the long march through the institutions, but to actually build parallel institutions. And the parallel institutions have twofold thing. One is that you build a structure for yourself that you can then use to resist the regime or to co-opt it. And the other thing is that if everything does all go sideways and falls apart, you have in place the resources and the structures necessary to weather it better than other people do. So, and that's probably, and I think and then if you can begin to then do your own long march through the institutions, you're looking at a 3 or 4 generational project. Maybe it was you that said this, CJ. But it was, and that to me has really, struck a chord, is that we have to stop looking to people like Trump, or it's going to be, I'm trying to think, DeSantis, or, the governor of Texas, whatever. And I'm just losing names here, that they're going to be the one that's going to rise up, or it's going to be Eric Prince. He's going to march through, although Eric Prince might be the one that could actually do it. But it's, I think that really you have to look at that. Wow, we're too busy doing work or whatever. And I think that's part of the problem, is that people have to realize that, no, we have to be working on building these institutions, because if we don't build them, the regime is going to build them for us. And we've shown the results of that. And in fact, they've already done that and built the whole patronage network out from there. And we're left holding the bag because we thought ideas would win the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is, I don't know if you got that from my essay, the parallel thing, but I got that from Sam Francis, but he basically was describing the fact that the long march through the institutions was the backup plan.
Yeah, I think that's what Oren was talking. Maybe it was your interview with Oren recently where that came up.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So, the idea was that they would create a parallel, because the whole way the managerial state functions and works, and this goes back to the New Deal, is they don't put a gun to your head and say consent. They dangle incentives in front of you, and you get financial and economic, primarily, but also other cultural benefits for participating in regime objectives. And it's more advantageous for you to just go along. That's the way the managerial state works. So what happens is, and this I share this all the time, but like in my county, they were going to have a pride event at a local county park. And my county in California said, no, we don't do that here. Like, it's not part of who we are. The private event planners, and this is weird, like, I don't know where these people came from, but anyways, they complained basically higher up the food chain. And the state said to the county that it was going to withhold a lot of its development resources and withhold some. Now, at a county level, if you have to tell your people that the state is withholding its financial resources and they can't pay on time, all that kind of stuff, the people are going to put a lot of pressure on the county. And sure enough, my county folded. And so that's how the structure works. So, but if you create parallel institutions, if you create networks where we can take care of each other, and you can say to the state, okay, keep your money, we don't want it, and you have backup plans for taking care of your people, that's actually a very serious pushback against the regime because it doesn't have the infrastructure required. It's not going to bring the military in. It doesn't work like that. We are not communist Russia. We function through managerialism, and therefore we have to learn how to say no, and parallel institutions, parallel networks, and parallel mechanisms of taking care of each other is a key aspect to our fight.
Well, have you had a chance to talk with Ernst van Zyl from South Africa, CJ, at all? Because Ernst frames it somewhat differently, right? Because, coming from the Afrikaner community where they were the state for a long time, they were the ones that ran everything, that they got used to the whole thing of handing off their sovereignty to the state and just trusting it, right? And so they handed off education, they handed off the universities, they handed off healthcare, they handed off everything. And now they're discovering that they can no longer count on the state to actually give, supply these things credibly. They can't get power. The schools are terrible. The universities are awful, and so forth, so forth. So what they ended up having to do with their AFRIFORM is begin to sign people up into a sort of a broader organization. I think they have pretty much like 1 in 5 people. So basically there's at least one person in almost every Afrikaner household who is part of AFRIFORM. And what they're doing, what he says what they're doing is that they're taking back their sovereignty. So we're starting our own schools. So we're teaching our own kids. We're starting our own town. So Aranya is part of this, right? So we start our own town. We sue the government for our own town charter. So that way we have our own separate, we're not subject to anybody else. And they're now even looking into things like, can we develop small power plants that can supply a small town or small community, so we're not dependent upon the state, run power companies for our power, that we can for ourselves build our. So they're reclaiming for themselves all of these aspects of sovereignty separate from the state. Now in South Africa, the state is weak enough that they can do this without major blowback, but the concept is basically the same, in that you're trying to all these functions that you gave over to the state beforehand, you're now trying to claim them on a local level and do them again for yourself.
I don't see, that's not different than what I was saying at all.
No, it's just the way he frames it. It's just the way he talks about it in terms of like how you ended up letting it go, because at one point you trusted the state and you let all this stuff go. Now you can't trust the state, and now you have to begin to take it all back and reclaim your sovereignty for yourself.
Yeah. And that's exactly, and I think the regime, this is its weak point too. It's very good. It's very good at pressing out against like J6. Like if J6 was what we are being told it was, which it's not, they're good at handling that. I mean, that's going to be squashed like a bug. They're not good at, there was that city recently that basically separated from, the unincorporated area in, what was it? Like
Baton Rouge, right?
Yeah.
St. George is the new city.
Yeah. So the regime, I don't think, has the infrastructure set up to handle movements like that. I think that's its weak point, and that needs to be the object of our focus.
I think also, just sort of riffing on this, reclaiming sovereignty and doing it in this very bottom-up fashion. The other sort of boogeyman that I think of, growing up in the South and being a Southerner, is diffusing the canard that people will say, well, we can't do a civil war, you can't secede, we already tried it once. But exposing the misconception there is that none of us want a violent armed conflict like that right now. None of us can handle it. It's not, nobody's pushing for that. And so to talk about these ideas doesn't mean we're going to try and reverse Appomattox Courthouse, because that can't be reversed. That's part of the warp and woof of the America that we have now. Anyway.
No, I agree.
Absolutely. This is a good question for you, CJ. Right. What are the pressure points of the regime from Fear of the Lord? Right. Maybe elucidate some of those.
Yeah. Like I said, people who can, this is the thing about and I'm supposed to be like the Ted K anti-industrial guy, right? But there is a lot of promise in solar power and doing things by yourself and taking advantage of these, mechanisms of decentralization. And it sounds super libertarian to get into this, but I really do think that is a pressure point. I really do think that they don't have the political infrastructure required, for instance, like on the border with Abbott. If he had just told them, to go pound sand and that he was going to, use all of his armed resources to secure the border, I don't think the federal government has the legitimacy right now to march in and confront Abbott's resources. I think it would completely backfire on the federal government, and the federal government knows it. So I think COVID did a lot to rewrite our ability to trust in the legitimacy of regime narratives. It demonstrated the fact that there is no staying power to the narratives of the regime. And I think that's the largest pressure point. When individual counties can actually push back, nullify, say no, they can refuse state finances, they can refuse subsidies, and they can take care of themselves on their own. I think that's a massive pressure point, because I think the regime operates on dangling carrots. And if we don't want their carrots anymore, I don't think they're prepared to, get aggressive on it. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I think, well, and think about it in these terms, right? Think 10 or 15 years down the road when they don't have as many carrots to dangle anymore because they're broke. Right. And they know they can't just keep printing money. Then what happens? Right. Then, and if you've already been building these structures to be resistant, right, to have a firewall against the processes of the managerial regime, and they don't have the carrots to dangle anymore, then all of those things will flourish, right? There'll be many more places where they just say, no, we're not doing this, right? You don't even have the highway money to send to our district anymore. And so we're not going to comply, right? When the state of California doesn't have the money to force your county to have a pride parade, right? Then you can begin to reassert sovereignty again. Like, so a lot of that is like keeping in mind the trajectory that things are on, that the unlimited money spigot is going away, right? And not in this like libertarian, like in the libertarian world where CJ and I came from. It's like, oh, it's just around the corner. It's the thing's going to implode any minute now. I think it happens much slower than that, right? Very slowly. They can't do the same things they used to be able to do 10 years ago. And that process will continue to play out, and you'll be able to resort more and more sovereignty, right? Instead of just over a town or a small rural county, right? Entire cities, whole states, even being able to liberate themselves. That's how this process will play out. So what else? I mean, this is a good point too, right? The domestic power of the regime, I'll play it, comes from the media. As they control the media, they can keep the public thinking about and fighting over the same things. I agree that is where their power lies, but even that has begun to wane, right? They don't have the same power with these things. Like I have, some of it is like you have the true believers, right? This maybe like 20% of the population where whatever NPR says or whatever the New York Times says, that's the truth, because like deep down, they really want it to be true. They really want our system's totally fine. It's just this Trump guy that showed up, and all of a sudden now we have people are questioning the legitimacy of democracy, and they're questioning the justice system and all these things. Before that, everything else was fine. And CNN tells them, and the New York Times and NPR and everything tells them, yeah, you're totally right. But the rest of the country hears that and thinks that's kind of crazy. That's nuts. They don't believe these things in the same way they did. And the legitimacy, like you were saying earlier, CJ, like 2020, right? Just the image of the fiery but mostly peaceful protests. Let people, like, I can't leave my house right now without wearing this. I can't even leave my house right now, right? Legally. But if I wanted to go burn a building down, I'm totally free to do that. Right? People see that, and there's so much cognitive dissonance. It gets past the programming that they've had for decades, so their entire life. Right? That process will continue to exacerbate as well. Right, there'll be more and more people, and again, like I'm not a populist. I don't think like, oh, once the people see the truth, once it's all revealed, then we'll rise up and we'll throw down this horrible government. Like that's not how it works.
Right.
But you have this core, this mass of people that an elite figure can call upon for support. Right. So you have bottom and top at the same time to be able to affect change. So that all of that is just sitting there waiting for someone, right? That's I fully subscribe to elite theory, and believe that, yeah, there's this crown lying in the gutter. There's 70 million people that will support somebody who is Trump, but way better and way more effective and will go all the way, right? That's there and they know it, right? That's the problem that they face, right? They know that that's there and there's nothing they can do about it. That's a huge part of it. So anyway, any thoughts on that?
One of the things I think though too, Andrew, that when we talk about elite theory, is that the parallel movement gives you an opportunity to pull people away, because right now all of the major reward structures are in DC, they're in New York, and they pull people away from the small towns who want to go to these major centers for the rewards that the regime can bring them that they can't get in their small town. Mm-hmm. So you may not be able to offer them the financial incentives, but many of these parallel communities are in some ways like the ultimate startup. And so you're offering them maybe a chance to form a family that they couldn't otherwise, or that they could buy property where they couldn't otherwise. But now you're also saying, listen, we're not just going to, buy a house and have a wife and kids, but we're actually going to build a community. And then out of this community, not maybe us, but it might be our children or our grandchildren in this thing that we're building, who then become the new elite that is able to rise up and challenge, because we've given them something here to incentivize them to stay, grow, and build here, and not run off to DC or to New York or to LA or whatever to seek their fortune away from the smaller communities. Because that brain drain and that talent drain is very real.
Oh yeah.
And we need to have and incentivize those young men to stay at home or to come back home or to immigrate into these small communities to build something that they can't build in New York, DC, or LA.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's really important. I mean, look, I'm soon to be one of those, people. I'm leaving my, beloved California for these very reasons. That there is a need to band together with aligned people who recognize the reality of our political situation, and I'm doing that, and I'm going to be very clear about where I'm going later this year. But it's something that's been on my heart. It's like I could survive in this place, but if we're talking about legitimately providing a fortress for our children and thinking of those multi-generational and multi-decade lengths of time, then these are precisely the things that we need to do. And if you're if you're listening to this and you are alone, you need to seriously start, moving yourself and your family into situations that can survive a collapse, because it is not fun. It's not a Marvel movie to experience where this is going next.
No. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the collapse. And when you say that word collapse, right, people have this imagery of Mad Max, not the recent movie that looks terrible, but the
original.
Yeah. They have this vision in their heads of it's just gonna be chaos, it's gonna be anarchy everywhere. We're gonna there's gonna be guys in these costumes driving cars and things like that. It's not gonna be like that, or this dystopian fiction that you often see in movies. It's much more like everything just, there's that 4chan post that bounces around in my head, and I wish I could just call it up on the screen, but where it's just everything slowly gets worse and worse, right? The quality of everything, and things that you took for granted no longer are things that no longer exist. That and I talk to people every day where they're I grew up even in a city, and it was like a small town. It was peaceful, people. There was no crime. there were, young families everywhere. There was actually a neighborhood and communities that existed, and nowhere like that exists anymore. I mean, you could move to some rural area where you still kind of have that isn't completely ransacked by fentanyl and things like that. You move to those places, but there's no jobs there, right? So you have to, be like fully remote, and it's poverty stricken, and you can still maybe have a semblance of community like that, but those things don't largely exist anywhere. And if you do that, then you run the risk of what CJ is saying. You move to an isolated place where then your kids grow up, they go to college, and they go off to the city, and they're gone. But there's no actual community that's intergenerational where your kids stay in the same place. They grow up, they get married, they have kids, you have grandchildren there, and generation upon generation where you can build something with roots. And those are the things that we have to build, right? Because this slow burning collapse is happening. And if you build those things, right, you can not only survive it, but thrive.
I think we should lean into that. The slow burning nature of it. It's going to be like you've noticed on your food bill, and you've noticed on your electricity bill. It's going to be that slow pain. But speaking of all this stuff, my photographer is here for my home listing because I'm putting it up on the market next week. So I actually have to bounce. You guys can keep going, but I got to go meet her. So
I'm going to have to bounce myself. So
CJ's leaving. We're all out of here.
We're out.
I'll
do it myself.
I was getting close to that point myself soon, but yeah.
So appreciate it, brothers. Thank you much. One parting comment to help some folks out there, maybe. Andrew brought up COVID, and this is why I think during COVID, it was so important to refuse the mask where you could. Mm-hmm. Because this is one of the ways that we break the narratives. Mm-hmm. Elul talks about this a lot in the propaganda book. Mm-hmm. The propaganda is meant to produce action. Mm-hmm. And if we realize it and refuse the action that propaganda is trying to get us to do, that's one of the first steps towards breaking the narrative. So
exactly.
Love you guys. Appreciate it. Great time.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thank you, Cryptos.
Are you going to do it
alone? I'm going to close this out here. I could keep going and just ramble on for another hour, but really what I want to say in closing is that this conviction, it shows us. I mean, like someone said earlier, the whole Constitution's still alive, guys. We just need to respect the Constitution harder. Well, all of those people have been refuted conclusively this week. And it was nothing it wasn't anything, Wade Stotts or anyone else said, although this video was great. Or the arguments that we made on Twitter. Like, events have shown us that if you believe that still today, you are not worth listening to, right? Don't listen to people
That's
like
a
that.
you thing.
Like, and like the point of, CJ and I doing this podcast and the stuff that all of us write online is about reorienting Christians, especially evangelical Christians, to see the time of day, to see where things are at today, to understand the political in the proper way, so that we can begin to do the kind of things we're discussing in this episode, right? The things that you personally can do to stem this, because we're not going to be able to become president of the United States and change and topple the regime ourselves, but there are things that you can do, and so go and do those. And so, again, everyone, thank you for watching and listening. Next week, CJ and I will be in Ogden, Utah. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to the conference, the New Christendom Conference in Ogden, Utah, so come say hi to us, and we'll maybe record an extra long episode, maybe have a special guest here or there. I don't know. We'll see. But until then, like, subscribe, share this wherever you find this, especially on YouTube, like it and share it and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. And until next week, everyone out there, stay peacefully dangerous, and we will see you next time.